Hello, I'm JR, and welcome to this single scoop episode. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Min.
Hi.
Oldar.
Howdy.
And Serin.
Hi guys.
Back in December, we announced that Serin joined as our newest Sunbae. She's been in single scoop episodes since then, and will of course join us for all of the upcoming season, but we haven't given her an official introduction, so we wanted to do that before the start of season 5. Let's start with getting to know her. Serin, why don't you tell us about yourself?
안녕하세요 여러분. 저는 K-Pop 선배즈의 유일한 한국인 선배이자 자료조사 그리고 번역을 담당하고 있는 세린이라고 합니다. 만나서 반갑습니다. Hi everyone, I'm Serin. I'm the only Korean 선배 of this team and I'm in charge of researching and Korean to English translation. I'm a native Korean 90s baby, born and raised in Korea. And for those who don't know, if you guys are wondering about my accents, I kind of moved back and forth in and out of Korea. So the first place I learned English was actually in Chicago, Illinois, United States. To give a brief introduction of myself, as for my favorite artists, I've been a fan of Yuna since 2006 or 7 and Block B since 2011. I also have a bunch of more biases / second biases from each generation of the K-pop history, but the list will be more eclectic than you think. Well, one of the first questions I got as I joined this team was how I got into K-pop. Since I am Korean, K-pop has literally been a part of my life since I was born. My parents have very different tastes in music. My dad was more into dance and more contemporary stuff, while my mom was more into old Western pop, ballads, or folk bands. But my dad was definitely the bigger influence into my preference. He is somewhat an early adapter when it comes to youth subculture, so he has been more up to date with new music. So he literally watched Sateji and Boys and Deuce's debut performances when he was in his mid-30s, and he would burn a ton of CDs with popular Kayo or play those music on his car. As far as I can remember, he has been listening to the songs of 엄정화, 김건모, Coyote, Fenko, H.O.T., Shop, etc. And then my exposure to K-pop was unintentionally severed when we first moved out of Korea. Because, my parents' priorities were about my education and their work. So, we weren't really aware or well connected to the network of the local Korean community. So the Korean media we kept in touch was limited to the news reports or the K-drama videotapes we would rent maybe once or twice a week. Once we returned to Korea, I naturally ended up absorbing a lot of mainstream Korean music with great curiosity. So when we were back in Korea, I remember some of the first artists I started listening to was Taeyeon, SG Wannabe, Dongbang Shingi, the artists who were really popular back then. Then also the lesser known artists or even rookies that gained less attention. And by the time I moved out of Korea again, I became more familiar with the internet. And a lot of the locals and fellow students were also Hallyu fans, so staying in touch with the Korean charts was a piece of cake. I think my love for Korean music just grew on from there. But my love for the classics grew even bigger during this time since I watched Pop Soul religiously. And one segment focusing on the number one songs from the past made me dig into the very songs I loved when I was a kid. And the Inkigayo livestream that went viral here in Korea back in 2019 was another major catalyst. Since that was what introduced me to my current first-gen bias, I won't name names here because that will make me very easy to track down, and I want to stay anonymous on this podcast right now. Anyway, it reconnected me to more of my childhood favorites and introduced me to even more throwback goodness. What I enjoy about K-pop is how unique it is. Some of you might interject and say nothing is original about K-pop because the system was inspired by J-pop, the aesthetics and genres were taken from the black artists, so on. But when I say unique, I don't mean the roots of the music. I'm referring to how it evolved over time because if you look into the history, it is very different from how music for other countries evolved over time. Within the K-pop umbrella, we have dance pop, we have idol groups, we have male solos, female solos, R&B, ballad, raps, hip-hop, indie bands, rock bands, trot, even Kuga could be considered K-pop in a sense, right? And the only factor that lumps into K-pop is the fact that the artists sing in Korean, but the music style and genre and everything else is so diverse. Another thing I like about our music is the sentiments. Well, this will apply more to the 90s and 2000s music in my opinion, because the way the K-pop industry is trying to branch out to the international markets is definitely different from the music I grew up with. It would have been led more by Koreans and or Korean diaspora and appealed more to the local listeners. If you look up the lyrics of the popular Korean songs from that era, it just hits differently. Some of the nuances that exist in the Korean vocab even get lost in translation. So if you're interested in the history of K-pop, I recommend watching this documentary show called Archive K, because it's one of the most notable instances and one of the first where musicians discuss the history of K-pop and how it evolved. I'll be linking a video about songwriter Park Ji-yeon in the script, so you guys can check it out. Other than K-pop, my interests include baking, cooking, and web surfing in general. I like to search out random facts about other things, and the knowledge surprises my friends and family sometimes. I used to be interested in learning foreign languages when I was younger, but the interest has unfortunately died down as I grew up. However, I still like to interact with my international friends and talk about the interesting aspects of our languages. And I picked up the hobby of baking when I was living abroad, and that kind of like branched out into cooking as well. Like in my pastime, I bake like cookies, cake bread, sometimes even stuff like dainty stuff like tarts. And I often give like the pastries I baked to my friends as a gift. These days, regarding cooking, I think my dream is to perfectly recreate the flavors of the various kimchi that my mom makes. Okay, I guess that's it about me.
Hold on. Everybody just been like,
Yeah. So let's talk about how we met Serin. I mentioned back in the K-Pop 201 episode that one of the most important parts of researching is networking, and Serin is the reason why I say that. I was introduced to her through a mutual friend in the first gen community, and after going through DMs, it seems like the first mention of her was in the summer of 2021, because a couple of years ago, J-Dux had released a short video explaining how the K-pop rumor was false, and then I talked to her about it a couple years later, and she said that she got some of her information from a Korean friend, and she didn't say her name, so I didn't connect the dots immediately that it was Serin, because I didn't, realize that they were the same person. I met her, though, through talking on Twitter about First Gen. Then I started DMing her about YouTube, and our first DM that I could find was on August 23rd, and she was thinking of making a YouTube channel to inform people about K-pop, but she wasn't sure of where to start with it. And as I used to have a YouTube channel, I explained things like how long it takes to script, record, and edit videos. I also introduced her to Audacity, which is the program we record our episodes with. It was a lot of information, so she was overwhelmed with all of it and all the planning she would need to do. So I put it out there that if she wanted to practice with us until she was ready to make her own channel, I was open to it. And we kept talking and exchanging information until September 2022. And that was when we had space in our podcast schedule. And her and I had been talking about the group K-pop for a while. That was the initial introduction to her that I didn't realize was my introduction to her. So I DM'd her and asked if she'd be interested in doing an episode with me. And I ran it by Min and JR first, by the way. I wasn't going to invite someone without discussing it with them before. And she said she was up for it. Then we invited her to the Discord we have for the Sunbaes and prospective Sunbaes. And immediately her and JR hit it off because they both like baking. And usually only one person researches and scripts a group episode, and that person is the lead for everyone else, because even though that sounds like a lot of work, the reason why we do that is that way the information is cohesive, so that way you don't have a lot of overlap, because if you got someone focusing on here, then you've got someone focusing on here, you might run into more information, or because you're not systematically going through it, you might miss a bunch of stuff. So we just leave it to one person to put it all together.
like our first deep dives where we each did a year.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, we did that. Yeah.
It was a mess.
Well, that was the reason I took over the whole discography. We need to do something about Poor Infinite and After School. Those episodes are so bad, especially in retrospect. It's one thing when you're recording it, but then when you're like, wow, we do not do anything like that anymore. They deserve better, in my opinion. Because we had that history of issues when we did used to split up the work. When Serin worked with me, we were so efficient and we finished it in 2 months. And typically when we are making a script for a deep dive, it takes anywhere from 6 months up to a year or two. Like, there's an episode that's coming up where I started it like 2 years ago. Yeah, I had a doc ready for Eagle 5 like 2 years ago, dude. But like, I wasn't going to do it immediately, but like, I knew I wanted to get to them someday. So considering how long like our episodes typically take, her and I were able to do K-pop in 2 months. And that was probably some of the strangest research and most in-depth research I have ever done. Because that involved going back through old fandoms, which was... So we became way more efficient with her. And I was like, we need to do something with her, not just one-offs. And so we kept inviting her and saying, ooh, what about this with her? And then it grew from there till we eventually gave her the invitation.
Yeah, so as we previously mentioned, Serin really loves cooking and baking. I really love cooking and baking. So we connected on that specifically. In our Discord, we have a bunch of different like channels, right? And one of them is food-based. So we are all constantly sending pictures of like homemade meals, dishes from restaurants, and recipes and stuff like that. And like, I don't really subscribe to the whole like love language thing, but if I had one, it would be food and making food for people, making stuff people want to eat. So sharing that with others always brings me so much joy. So Serin obviously shares Korean cooking all the time, so that's been really awesome, because who doesn't love a good Korean recipe? But she's also pretty experimental with the stuff that she makes too, so it's always fun to get like progress shots and see what new things she's going to be making or trying out, or what new ingredients she found when she was out. So that's always fun.
Right. Yeah, because, you know, like, I've been interested in Middle Eastern cooking and baking, like, because I know, guys, one of my friends is of Palestinian descent, so she's been, like, sharing a few Middle Eastern ingredients and recipes to me, so I'm trying my best to find the stuff I can source here in Seoul, so it can get very interesting, but the thing is, I don't know what those ingredients are, and, well, JR has been a great help, because, like, she has, like... she is familiar with some of the
I don't know if I've ever said this outright, but I am half. So there's some like overlap there. I'm not Palestinian, but you know, the regions are close. So
yeah, no, but like some of the ingredients are like used across nations. And like, you know, another thing like we have in common, we're based in the Midwest. Like I'm not from America, but I spent time in Illinois, Chicago, Cook County. Like if any of you guys like listening from Cook County, highly like because that's where I lived.
Yeah. So a lot of connections there. And I think one of the K-Pop Sundae's best traits is that we all bring something different to the table. And that's why having someone like Serin come on to join us, it's really exciting. And I think it opens up a lot of new possibilities for us. So as Serin and Oldar have both already kind of touched on, she's a treasure trove of knowledge, and we're so thankful for her expertise, and we're excited to see what comes next.
Another thing that I just thought of that Serin and I do is that if I'm reading news about Korea, she's the person who I want to talk to about it. Like, we've been talking about the doctor strike in the DMs. That's one of those things where it's like most people who are interested in K-pop might not care about how big of a deal that is, but there's a lot of worry on my end and hers about it. So we've been discussing actual issues like that, or if I discover like old news, it's like she'll understand when I'm having these reactions, which is why I brought her on for the Sunbae episode, which is on our coffee, is because I knew that she knew more than me.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, what is your court system up to?
Did I? Well, you did like most of the research, like, and to be honest, like, Sundae passed when I was when I was literally a baby, so I only know like the fact that he passed away and stuff. Anyway, another thing like I remember about like interacting with you is, well, you ask so many different questions about like the Korean culture and stuff like that. Like when you were working on the HOT project, for example, you asked me about this specific part about rubber bands.
It's like jump ropes, but the term that how way it's translated is rubber bands, and I'm like, those are some big rubber bands.
Yeah, we literally call it 고무줄놀이, but in the Anglophone culture, they call it like skipping rope or something like that.
Well, the way that he was talking
it's
about
skipping
jumping
rope.
with them, I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And he was talking about how like all the girls wanted to play because he was so good at it. I was like, why? And it's like, oh, it's like jump rope.
Yeah, this is what I usually mean when a lot of context gets lost in translation. Because some of those terms could be like literal translations, and a lot of idioms can be really hard to understand if you're not like used to like how Koreans speak. Some of those like controversies that arise like in the K-pop community, for example, when people say like some of these K-pop stars are being colorist because they talk about being tan so much, like sounds very offensive or almost like a slur if you like translate it directly, but we have been saying that specific term for so long that it has been ingrained for us like as the definition of tanned. It sounds different and we don't find it problematic. We try our best to replace it with just the words tanned like when we're translated into English, but within the Korean community, we just find it very natural to say it.
Yeah, there's just some things that like they just don't translate one for one, which that's the thing though, that when you study languages, you'll find where it's like, well, I'm saying this and this is the word in the other language. Yeah, but it doesn't mean the thing you think it means.
Right. I experienced it a lot when I was first learning English when I was little, because some of the most baffling things that kind of threw me off when I first started learning about idioms and stuff was break a leg. I didn't understand why people would say break a leg to mean good luck. Yeah, there's also that term, like, are you spoken for? When I first heard it, I thought, like, it meant, like, hey, is your opinion getting validated? But no, apparently it means, are you engaged? Or do you have a boyfriend, girlfriend? Yeah. It sounds so wrong to me.
At least with English. I know this is true in other languages too, but English, I know there's a ton of those, where something is phrased a certain way because of something like 100 years ago, where in context, it made more sense. And we just have lost that context over the years, but we still say the thing, which that makes it even more confusing for poor English learners. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my students, when I used to teach, that they'd be like, that's wild. And I'm like, yes. Why? Well, because this and this.
Mm. Yeah, to be fair, a lot of the Korean idioms and like terms are probably based on such historical or like euphemistic stuff that just gets kind of like historically faded in the process, like, and people don't really think about where it originated from.
Yeah, a lot of times
anymore,
especially like when you're teaching history, you're not going to teach typically stuff that turned into idioms.
So me and Serin, we don't know each other all that well because socializing is hard. But we do have a couple of things in common, and I've been able to ask her all of the dumb questions when I have come across things that just straight up don't make sense when I put them into all Google translators, all translators I have the access to, and I'm still thoroughly confused. I have then been on my knees, begging Serin, please, the does this mean? Please. What does this mean? So she has suffered through a lot of dumb questions from my side, and surprisingly always been able to find answers for them. And I'm very thankful for that.
I don't find them dumb, so like keep the questions rolling.
There was one moment that if you listen to our bloopers from last season, that was one of those moments. In case you're wondering, that was about Serin.
Yes.
Really?
So yeah, I really appreciate that, and I can't wait to get to know you more.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Same here.
Very nice.
Any more before we do the conclusion?
I just think it's nice that we have one more person who is knowledgeable and who is just as enthusiastic about the work as we are. Because when I first brought the idea to her and I was sort of showing her around and all the work we do, poor Serin was very overwhelmed. She's like, and you do this too? And I went, yes. In the span of a year? Yes. How? That was like a 3-hour call, was just taking her through our Google Drive. And there's a lot of things that we do that we don't have content out about yet. Like there's a lot of things we are stockpiling. So she saw the stockpiles. We took her into the back room, as it were, and showed her our filing cabinets.
You don't want to see them.
I was always interested in making like this kind of platform, like an actual Korean talking about K-pop and sharing the Korean viewpoints of things and stuff like that. But if I was gonna work on my platform on my own, it would have taken a lot more time than I would have expected. But having an actual team working with me and behind me is more precious than anything.
Sweet.
Because I know, like, we'll have each other and we'll be helping each other working on these projects. So it actually feels great to be in a part of a team. And also, like, this is a personal confession, but, like, sometimes when we discuss, like, the, like, very heavy topics within our chat rooms and stuff, you know, sometimes those topics overwhelm me because I know, like, some of those things can get very, like, depressing or controversial, and some of those like things going on in the world, it almost embarrasses me to like say, because it can be like disgraceful, like really, like, guys, I'm proud to be Korean, but so the things that go about in the K-pop fan community, like it can make me feel embarrassed to be a Korean as well. So I always have to deal with this kind of conflicting sentiments about sharing my personal 2 cents as a native Korean. And sometimes it means I'll have to be the devil's advocate and try to explain the sides of the K-nets that the international fans are not fond of. But so I'm always kind of scared about being jumped at or getting like hated on for that, but I guess that happens, and just sharing my personal thoughts, it just made me feel like my opinion is also getting understood or validated, like just as much as yours. So it just makes me feel less lonely about it.
I'm so glad you feel like we can do that for you.
It's just, all countries suck, just in general. Every country has backstory. Norway is
I think
no
that's
better.
also why it's so important that we discuss Korean news, like what's going on in Korea, in our end of the year news episodes, because there are people who think, oh, because I saw this when I used to study Japanese as well, like, oh, this is such a bad country, I'm going to go to another country and it's going to be great. And they don't have any clue about the laws of the land, certain expectations. They just have a general idea of the land. And
Customs.
so I think us kind of going, hey, there's this, this, and this. Hey, there is major crime. There's major social issues going on. Like, sometimes you are getting rid of one problem, or you're trading one problem for another one. And for some people, it might be worth it to go to a different country.
Yeah, it just humanizes them a little more to be like, there is more outside of K-pop. Y'all are a little bit narrow-minded. We gotta let you know what else is going on there.
Well, there's some really interesting things, and good and bad. And I think more and more, like, the average K-pop fan are starting to realize that and are starting to explore those areas. Like, we're seeing people be more interested in the law lately and the idea of healthcare in some ways, and education in some ways. And I feel like in the past, I would say past 15 years, that there's not 15, less than 15, maybe 10 years, there's been more international fans understanding why their favorite has to enlist and what that means and what's going to happen, the process, and that they're going to come back. They're not gone forever, just for this little time. And I've seen that sort of expectation change how people interact with that time period, which I think has been in some ways for the better. So I think it's good that people understand, because again, K-pop is started in Korea for Koreans originally, and then they're like, other people are listening to us? What? Let's go meet them. And then, we have this whole expansion. So, yeah, we need to learn all this stuff, and Serin is good for making sure that we have the context. Like, did I understand this right? Which that was like 90% of the Sungjae episode was, I think that this is the legal system that you're doing. And she's like, I don't even know. So it's like, okay, good. I'm not the only one confused.
Alrighty.
To wrap up, we're excited to have a new Sunbae. As you can tell, this wasn't a decision we made lightly, as she is the first new addition to our team since we started this all. We're very thankful to have you here, and we hope you're gonna have fun a lot with us.
Thank you. Likewise. Well, I know that there are a lot of Korean/Korean diasporas who are also interested in like these kind of topics, but yeah. Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, then please make sure to rate, subscribe, follow, and tell your friends about us. If you want to interact with us or just see more of our content, then you can follow us on Twitter at K-Pop Sundae or on our other social media platforms, which will be in the description. Just a reminder that next month, Season 5 premieres, so keep your eye out for that. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye!
다음에 봐요.
안녕.